I am Julie Mead, and I am the very proud mother of a 5.5-year survivor of metastatic Ewing sarcoma. My daughter is now 21, and I am proud and honored to have been her caregiver and to now just be her mom and to be involved in everything that she does. And I think that I can very easily say for anyone who is diagnosed with sarcoma that I understand your journey, and I've been there and I have lived it. And my daughter unfortunately had a really bad prognosis, so I also understand how scary this is, and want you all to know that there is hope. Your person, your special person in your life is not a number. And your person is a special person, a loved person, and those statistics and stuff don't need to apply to your loved one, because the statistics, the odds that we got, if we had lived in that place, we couldn't have gotten up every morning and did what we did. So as a caregiver, we as a family, it kind of fell to me to be the caregiver. My husband was very involved as well, but because her treatment was, a good year, and I'm talking solid year of in the hospital a lot, he had to make money still to get us through this treatment. And so it was really, he went and was the breadwinner, and thankfully I wasn't working at the time. So it was fairly easy for me to become her primary caregiver. I didn't have to leave a job or anything. It was difficult also because we had a son who was 3 years younger than Miranda, so he was about 13 at the time. And so that was a tough spot always, is making sure he was also looked after and didn't come home to an empty house and had a warm meal made. But for me, I became everything for Miranda as far as a caregiver. And I was happy to do it, honored to do it, but it was difficult a lot of the time because I so wanted to advocate for her, and yet I was still learning. This was, so much you give over to the medical professionals because you don't understand the disease, but it became times where I realized I could say, no, let's not do that now, can we wait? It was the constant waking her up in the middle of the night to get a blood pressure check. We knew she wasn't going to die from a heart failure in the middle of the night, and so I felt it was really important for her to get some sleep. And so I think as a caregiver, it was important to realize you had some muscles to flex in this process and that you were able to weigh in, and especially when I knew what was important to Miranda too. We had brought her earplugs and masks to put over her eyes. You've got the beeping, and so it really became important just to make sure she was getting some sleep, because that was a place we were at a lot. And also as a caregiver, and especially to a 16-year-old, there was a lot of push and pull going. My daughter suddenly lost control of everything in her life. She didn't get asked if it was okay that she had to drop out of school, drop out of all 3 of her sports, not go to the homecoming dances. She wasn't able to attend school. And so it was really me trying to help her. How can we give you some autonomy and independence? Yet I didn't dare miss when a doctor rounded on her because there was so much information coming at us. And oftentimes also it was a luxury for her to tune out, because sometimes she just didn't want to be in the nitty-gritty of all the conversations. And so I had my notebooks. I would take notes, copious notes, because sometimes what I heard and what I would go back to later was very different. And that also gave me a feeling of control a little bit, that somehow I could help in this process. One of the big things that I did was charted her numbers. So that would be, all the hemoglobin and the white blood cell count and stuff. And it was really good to do that because I was able to look back and see patterns. Like, ooh, she's going to be really down with her numbers right now. And this is when she's going to be the most susceptible to getting sick. And this is when she's probably going to feel the worst. And so kind of having a feeling like you knew when something might not go great, it felt a little bit more like you could be on the watch, because at the very beginning of treatment, She had her chemo, she came home, we're like, yay, she's home. Well, boom, she wound up back in the hospital like 2 days later. And we haven't been through that yet. So just in understanding how her body reacted to stuff, we were able to kind of keep an eye on things. When we weren't in the hospital, which seemed rare, I mean, we spent every major holiday, including all the, Veterans Day and everything else, in the hospital. But when she was home, it was a lot of laying around on the couch. It was me saying, what do you want to eat? And anything that she wanted, because we were so concerned about her dropping weight, because when you have chemo, you feel nauseous and you throw up. And so that doesn't help you keep meat on your bones. And she would lose weight, and I would get her home, and my job was to try and fatten her up a little bit. So whatever I could do that sounded good, I would make food for her. I think she really liked just kind of being around where I was. So she would, maybe watch TV, work on her homework a little bit. But I still think there was very much of a just kind of knowing that I wasn't too far away. And, unfortunately for Miranda, her biggest side effect was an extreme fatigue. So she wasn't always able to go out and do things in between her chemos. But one of the things we would do is, if it was a good day, all of a sudden we'd be like, random good day. Okay, what are we going to do today? And she would usually want to go get together with friends or whatever. So whatever she could do when she was feeling well, we would kind of drop everything else to make that happen. And then also, conversely, was when she woke up and all of a sudden she wasn't feeling well. And then those are the days where a lot of the time she laid on the couch with her head on my lap. We pulled up covers. I think Top Model, we were watching that series. And she also got very interested in like 2020 specials. And so those were kind of our moments. And for her, I think that was kind of a happy place. And so we just tried to do whatever we could. And then the other big thing that has nothing to do with me is Miranda loved being around her pets. We had a cat, and that cat just came and sat on her. And so there was so much good therapy and healing came just from being outside of the hospital. And then, of course, I was frantically in the background cleaning and doing the laundry and quick getting everything together and packing up a hospital bag for the very next stay she would have, which, we knew when the scheduled next day was, but it's not always scheduled when you wind up going in again. And then, of course, juggling all the different appointments and doing whatever we could to make Miranda happiest during that time, because she was sick and the chemo was hard, really hard on her. But she was also really resilient. So it was, in a lot of ways, she made it easy for me because she didn't complain. And I kind of took notes from her. Like, if she was, let's go do this, then I was, let's go do this. And her refrain over and over was, I got this, Mom. So that made my caregiving job a whole lot easier. As a caregiver, and especially as a caregiver to a child, so it was not about me. And I knew it wouldn't always not be about me, but I knew right then it had to be about my family, primarily my daughter, obviously. And so I became the captain of a ship. And, there wasn't really time for me to think, gee, do I need self-care? I mean, I got down to about 85 pounds because I was in the room when everything happened, because if I left to get something to eat, the doctors would round. And that was all information that was so important to me. And it was just moving one foot in front of the other, and it was appointments, and it was just going. So there wasn't time to say, gee, I'd like to relax or get some sleep or whatever it was. And also, I wanted to be there. I needed to be there. There was not a single night that my daughter spent in the hospital alone, ever. And there were probably only a handful of nights that I wasn't there, but I did have my husband would come, and on weekends it was their time if she was in, and that was a great break for her. And then I would go home and be a mother to my son, who was desperately missing his mom and any sort of normalcy. So it wasn't like I got to go home and just relax. It was like I got home and had to be a mom still. And I don't wish it was different, and I don't think I should have done it differently. And especially because she was my child, and I was so, it wasn't my fault she was going through this, but for sure I was going to do whatever I could to make anything she did be the best it could be, the most quality to her life. To, you know, if it was lasagna she wanted, lasagna she got. If she wanted to order a pizza and ate 2 bites. I mean, this was not a time to do anything other than just love on her. And again, you know, she, like I've said before, she made it easy for us because she was such a cheerleader for all of us, and so really consistent in, I've got this, I've got this. So, but what I will say is during treatment, there really wasn't time for me to worry about me. But as at the end, when the appointments really backed off, and when I say really backed off, that meant we were only in 4 times a week for an hour at a time or something, I did start sneaking a walk in. A neighbor would come and stay with Miranda so I could go grocery shopping. And little things like that were kind of self-care. Once treatment wrapped up, we got more and more involved in different things, because while Miranda was in treatment, she became an advocate for sarcomas and childhood cancer. And 15% of all sarcomas are pediatric cases. And so we did a lot of work like that. So that was some caregiving in a weird way, to be able to give back and get involved. And so that was a good thing for us. But it also made me reach out for my people, which was other moms, other families. And that was huge. And that's how I found Rain in Sarcoma, which has been just life-saving in our venture. And the other thing that's really challenging, and has been in these last 5 years, is finding a support group that is the right one for you. So Miranda was a pediatric childhood cancer survivor, but pediatric is usually little kids. And so the reason I bring that up, how incredible that connection was, and so many others didn't work, is find your group. Find, it might not be the ones that have the 4-year-olds, because you don't have a 4-year-old. You don't have a child at all. You're dealing with a husband, a spouse, a mother, a parent. You know, there's so many different people that get impacted by sarcoma. So you need to find your people and keep looking, because they are out there. And when you find them, you don't have to talk, because you both get it. You know, you just, you know. And sometimes you get together, and when I'm with my moms, we don't always talk about cancer. A lot of the time we don't talk about it at all. And then a lot of the time we cry about cancer still. And so it's just, but it's really organic, those moments. And it is a really good place to be when you found your people. I will never say I was strong or brave or courageous, because so many people are like, oh my gosh, how did you do it? And you don't do it because you want to or because you're brave. You do it because you have to. You do it because you just keep going. You don't get the luxury to step back and say, is this good or is this bad? You just do it. To get to the next, to get through it. I mean, one of the things that I think about, and in my religious bearing, was people didn't pray for us for a moment. They prayed us through this. They have prayed us through the horrible, all the way to the other side, and continue to. And I think for me, what I have learned is, you know, and again, the COVID thing is just a blip on the radar compared to when you have your health and nothing else matters, and all the crazy bric-a-brac is just white noise, because it really, obviously, so quick and easy to get to the heart of what matters and what's important for your family, for your extended family, to be a little greedy about what you need. And what I need is see my kids happy, so that kind of worked for all of us. So and of course, I think I knew I was strong. I'm a strong person, basically, but we did it. And to know mostly that Miranda did it, it always in the back of my mind made me think, if she does have a recurrence, we're a team and we know how we work, and we will keep going. And I know how we will respond and how we will fight through it. But also a very important thing is I learned very purposely, but also once time had elapsed, but also to live in the moment of hope more than the moment of fear. And sarcoma, if nothing else, wants you to be afraid all the time. That cancer, it is the biggest disservice that it does to you is I once heard it described as a gun in your back, 24/7. You never know if it's going to go off, if they're going to walk off and you don't know what's going to happen. And so that fear is always just, even now we're 5.5 years out. I still have fear. Of course I do. The stakes couldn't be bigger. But what I learned and what I really strived for was not to waste today being afraid about tomorrow. I think when you first get a diagnosis, and again, it's a diagnosis for your whole family, people wanted to do stuff for us, and I didn't even know what we needed, but I learned to just say yes. And I said yes to everything because I didn't really know what we needed. But there were certain things that I said yes to that I was so thankful that I had said yes to, that I didn't even know I needed. And the other thing was, it really helped a community form around us, and it also, people so desperately wanted to help. And so from that standpoint, I would say embrace whatever your community is offering, any kind of help. I mean, don't say no, say yes. And then just being in a place of being open, and it was just not knowing what I needed when I needed it, and sometimes it would be there. I mean, we would literally get home from the hospital and you couldn't go in or out our front door. There were so many boxes and packages. And one time somebody had made these smoothies, these nutrient-rich, so there was in all these little containers, and they were in the cooler, and she dropped them off. And so, it was just this amazing things. I mean, prayer shawls that we knew people had prayed over. And at the time, did I know I needed that or wanted that? Not at all. Do I love those things? They were so amazing. And some of them were super practical and helpful. And the other thing I would say is just live moment to moment. Don't get too far ahead of yourselves. Don't get frustrated that the doctors aren't talking too much. They're not talking about a future because they're worried there's not going to be one. They're not talking about the future because you've got so much right here, right now. So just live in the moment, in the day, get through the day. And again, cancer treatment days can be good, some of them. They can be bad, some of them, and they can be ugly, some of them. But no matter what, it's a day done, a day in the books, and a day closer to getting this treatment done. And so that kind of forward thinking, I was just very a box checker. When we got radiation, the most beautiful thing about the radiation treatment, 31 treatments, check, check, check. After the first week, I'm like, we've got 1/6 of our treatments done. I was very just, focus on what you have and the gifts and the accomplishments that are happening during treatment, again, instead of the fear. The fear, you don't know what you're doing, all of that, you just got to try and ignore it and stay busy, keep doing what the doctors are telling you to, have some trust in the process. The hardest part is to put poison into your loved one's veins. I mean, to watch that, to see the nurse say to you, oh, I've got to be really careful because if it drips on me, it will burn my skin. But yeah, it's okay to put it in my child. But you have to trust that process, more than any kind of cancer diet you can go on, anything else. I mean, of course, there's a lot of different angles to hit cancer at, but chemo is a necessary evil. And I will always say I have a love-hate relationship with it. I hated watching her go through it. I hated everything it took from her, and I love it for the life it's given her.
I am Michelle Coling. My sarcoma story started in November of 2010 when my husband was diagnosed. We had had a really wonderful vacation. Had been home about a month, and one morning the cat jumped on his chest and he hollered out in pain, and he hadn't really been feeling that bad. He was generally really healthy, took really good care of himself, and that's when I saw there was something there. So he went to the doctor, and it was discovered that after a lot of testing, it was discovered he had Ewing sarcoma. For him, it was about a grapefruit-sized tumor. It was attached to his peritoneum. So in the abdomen, there was lots of room for it to grow before he had any symptoms. Hindsight, of course, is 2020, and looking back, even on the vacation we were on, I remember it was the first time where he ran out of energy before I did. He is very much a type A, very, very busy. When we would go on vacation, he'd wear me out every day. And it was the first time he slowed down. And looking back, I can see where he had symptoms, but just kind of nothing you would go to the doctor for. He was much more tired. His color was a little off, I remember now. And even in that week before, I was thinking he's working too hard. He's way too stressed out. So again, it was one of those things you wouldn't really go to the doctor for. But at the point we found it, it was big enough, it was starting to cause issues as it grew and pushed on all that stuff you have in your abdomen. I remember we didn't know what it was. We knew there was a tumor, and went into the hospital right away for tons of testing. And I remember every test that came back, I was so relieved. They did, endoscopy. It wasn't stomach cancer. That was a big relief. They did a colonoscopy. They didn't find anything there. That was a big relief. So they kept checking off all these things that were running through my head that were really, really scary. And then when it came back, Ewing sarcoma, which there was another PNET, PNET, as another, I guess it's similar. And they were going to do testing to figure out exactly which one it was. The reality was it didn't really matter. It was a large tumor, and they had to begin treatment immediately. So yeah, I do remember ticking off all of those things that were top of mind that were really scary, and then it came back with this, and I didn't know what to think because I had never heard of it. I didn't know if that was good or bad. We knew it was serious. The information we got at this point was really from the doctors. We were in a place where it's just like, this is really serious. We were shocked. You're in shock. So even as I'm sitting here, I'm feeling kind of that same confusion that we had back then. It was just like your whole entire world was just turned upside down. And right now, all I know to do is that very next thing that they told me to do. We both kind of decided not to do a lot of research because we were going to jump into treatment no matter what. He was only 46 years old. So even if, I think about it a lot, even if they would have told us, or like I said, maybe they did and we just weren't able to take it in, that it was stage 4, we wouldn't have done anything different. I'm pretty confident about that. He was 46. We were going to do whatever we could have done. We would have made different choices for sure throughout the treatment. He wanted to work as long as he could because our course of way it was going to play out in our minds was, we're going to do these 4 courses of chemo. The tumor's going to shrink or stop growing. Then we're going to go into surgery, and then we're going to get our life back. So that's what we were focused on. And it didn't work out that way. I got him for another 85 days. We got another 85 days together. So again, we were just really focused. We decided, let's not do a bunch of research right now, because it's going to be more than we can handle anyway. Then a little bit later, my husband actually had one of his friends that he played volleyball with worked in an administrative capacity at the hospital where we were being treated. And she knew of brain and sarcoma. And so she came to visit us one day when we were in the hospital. My husband took all of his treatment inpatient because it was really hard to tolerate. And she stopped in and she had the notebook for us. So that was kind of the first time that we started flipping through it. We started digging in a little bit more. And then I do remember one night going home and it's like, okay, I'm going to be brave. Took a few deep breaths, got on the computer and typed in sarcoma, typed in Ewing sarcoma. And I still didn't really find very much. What I did find were links to medical journals and medical articles, and they were all over my head anyway. And they talked about prognosis, which was not good. And I kind of decided, you know what, I don't need to know anymore. So that's kind of how we approached it. That's how we got the notebook. There was a lot more in there that was helpful, more so than the medical stuff. That's all in there and that was helpful too, but even there's a section in there that I recall about, I don't remember exactly, but something about helping you through chemo, like what to eat, what to expect, how to handle it, and things like that. So there was more even just logistics of your life and how to get through this and resources on support and things like that. So that's what I remember. You know, I was there every minute that I could be. It was, you know, when you hear those words, like I said, everything just stops. All of the data, at least, you know, this was my experience again. But all the day-to-day stuff just falls away. And it was remarkable to me how all of a sudden nothing else is really important. We were really focused. Brett never backed down from any challenge. And he won. He loved winning. He was super competitive. And I just knew him. And I knew he was going to win. And that was kind of our attitude. There were really hard days, obviously. It seemed like when he was down, I was the strong one. And when he was feeling really strong, I had my moments. So we both had our moments, but I really remember just feeling like I was holding my breath all the time. We were really looking forward to getting to that living with it phase. But in our experience, like I said, it was 85 days between when he was diagnosed and the day he died. And so it was really kind of one crisis after another. We really learned how to ask for help, and we had a great support system. Family members really did defer to me, which I appreciated, and we had this great level of trust because people who knew us, you know, knew our relationship was super strong, and I just felt like we were in it together the whole time. I still had to work. Super, super grateful that my employer at the time was so generous and so caring and let me, sure I was a terrible employee for quite a while. And yeah, she was, you know, we were friends as well, so I'm still grateful for that. Brett didn't like being alone, even in his regular life, and so I made sure he never was alone. So we had a small group, including his parents and a couple of friends that could handle it, because honestly, it's really hard, and all the medical stuff, all the stuff that you have to do at home, you can't just bring anybody in. So that is something that I talk with caregivers about now. Pick those one or two really trusted inner circle people that will take your management, but will do things in a way you need it done. See if you can find systems. I help caregivers do that now, to try and find a system with calendars and everything else with to set up schedules and sort of processes, because it's so overwhelming. And to bring anybody new in to, you know, say babysit, it's a lot harder than it sounds. It was just, there were so many miracles along the way. I mean, all of these obstacles, and then all of a sudden someone or something would appear that would help us. So, I mean, that was part of the journey too, as hard as it was. All of these little miracles, and we noticed them, and we were so grateful along the way for all of those. So I wanted to make sure to say that to you. We didn't get the big miracle that we were hoping for, but we got all of these miracles along the way that made our journey so much easier when we needed it. I don't really even remember taking a minute off from cancer. I don't think I got a minute off. It got to be where he had to take all of his treatments inpatient, like I said, because he was too sick to be able to manage it at home. And so those were kind of my breaks. When he was in the hospital, I felt so much better about going to work. I would go and see him in the morning. I would go to work for a few hours, and then I would come and stay until 10 o'clock at night, go home, fall into bed. I would find something to eat here and there. I lost quite a bit of weight. Wasn't really that hungry, but you know, people are always like, just eat something, you have to eat. I slept when I could. Surprisingly, exhaustion just kind of took over a lot of the time, and I was able to sleep, but I definitely got less sleep than in my normal life. So yeah, I kind of survived on coffee and really bad hospital hamburgers that were the last ones there, because I finally made myself run up and go get something. But yeah, again, we would have people over once in a while that would help lighten the load. People would come and help us bring food. People would make pharmacy runs here and there. I remember coming home from a hospital, it was around Christmas time, and someone had come into the house and set up a Christmas tree for us. So those little things were little bits of respite. But I really don't recall doing anything for self-care. Maybe 1 or 2 nights out for dinner with the girlfriends. But again, I didn't want to miss a minute. So looking back, it's hard to say what I would do differently, again, because for us, it was a shorter period of time. I would like to say, yeah, I would have taken better care of myself, but in the moment, I don't know how. I tell people all the time, I do get asked for advice from caregivers, or, you know, how do I help my friend? And even when I am working with with clients as a doula, I always think of that caregiver and what do you need? Asking that, what do you need? Because they get lost a lot. You know, all of a sudden, all of the attention is on the patient, and that's fine. That's as it should be. But that whole, you know, that saying that we've come to know from the flight attendants, put on your own mask first. You can't really help anybody if you don't take care of yourself. And I really try to get that through to caregivers. You know, you feel selfish if you're trying to do something for yourself when someone you love is so sick. All you want to do is make them feel better, and it like doesn't matter how I feel right now is kind of what I remember. I would do anything to help them. But the reality is, to be able to take care of them in the best way you can, you need to protect your energy. You need to take care of yourself. You need to find those things that give you energy instead of sap your energy, because everything is so hard. Pretty much everything saps your energy. So even if it's, you know, just going outside, going for a walk, if you have a meditation practice, that's great. Don't skip it. You need it more than ever. Like I said, going out with girlfriends for just a night when you can just laugh and do something dumb and take your mind off it for just a little while. You're never going to forget about any of it. But find that thing that gives you energy and work it in, because by doing that, you will actually, it gives you time back, because you will have energy again for what you need to face next. We both are, you know, believe in a higher power and God. We did not have faith communities that we belonged to. We had some friends who did have a faith community. I remember a couple of good friends came over, and it was a beautiful night. They came over and did blessings, and we gobbled it up. But we felt really connected. We didn't talk about God, you know, out loud a lot. Like I said, we were mindful of all the little miracles that were happening. We kind of felt like our whole relationship was divinely guided, to be honest. And we had this sense of, we met each other later in life. We had both been married before. So, you know, when we found each other, I don't know, there was this sense about our relationship. We didn't know how long we had each other for. And we very much were just appreciative of every moment, even in our relationship. I remember feeling like when we got that diagnosis, it was almost like dang it, I knew it. You know, I knew there was going to be something. But it wasn't like a fear, like some people have fear or anxiety. It was more of somewhat of a knowing. So we really did have a deep relationship and felt like it was divinely guided. You know, the biggest thing, and I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned, was how to ask for help. I mean, I was very independent. Brett was very independent. Neither one of us were very inclined to ask for help, and we learned to ask for help. And we learned that doesn't really matter if the help you're getting is maybe not the way you would do things. You got to let go of that control. It's pretty good. You learn really well to learn to let go, and asking for help from anything, from little things to big things, but ask for help. You don't have to do this alone. No one can do this alone. That's my biggest advice. And again, figure out, it sounds a little, figure out a structure, figure out a process. There's going to be so many crises along the way, that if you can have some sort of structure and process for what you do know, that will help absorb some of those crisis points. And then you can just make adjustments. But if you can really get that structure and then tell those people in your life what that structure is, and that it's really important. If you are going to help me, and it's okay to be stern about it, if you're going to help me, I need you to do it this way, because that's what we have found works, whatever you have to do. But people want to help. I mean, I tell people all the time, the biggest gift that you can give someone is give them something to do. Everyone called, everyone wanted to help, everyone felt helpless. So if I could call somebody and said, hey, can you run to the grocery store? I need this. Or the prescriptions are ready. He's too sick to leave. I can't do that right now. Can you do this? Can you shovel? Asking people to come over and shovel. It was a particularly snowy winter that winter, I remember. Nobody said no. Nobody said no. They all jumped at it because people are doers, and people will say, let me know what I can do to help. And it's like, okay, but they don't really know what that means. So tell them what it means and accept it. Yeah. Yeah, I found out who I really was, to be honest. And that journey continues 11 years later. I found out a lot of the stuff I worried about doesn't matter. I was pretty high strung, pretty high anxiety person. I still was for a long time after. But you realize that all those things that you worry about weren't anything to worry about. It helped me get back to the essentials of what really matters. There were a lot, in my experience, a lot of kind of magical, mystical experiences that happened that really changed me spiritually. And I have very much grown in my spiritual journey because of this, and that has changed my life for the better, obviously. But yeah, I'm a very different person than I was then, and I like myself a lot more now. I knew from day one this was life-changing, but I also said out loud and to myself, this doesn't have to be life-ruining. I learned to live from the inside out instead of the outside in. And that has changed my life. That diagnosis isn't the end of your life. You still have value. You still are who you are. And you still can live until your last breath.
I'm Alan Christensen. I consider myself a caregiver emeritus for my wife, Sarah Christensen, who passed away in July of 2019 from angiosarcoma. Sarah was good at a lot of different things. She grew up a musician. She was a very good French horn player, a decent piano player. Always thought she was going to be a music teacher. And I think those skills helped in the long term with her being able to jump in and do all of the different things that she was asked to do or had a responsibility of doing. She didn't really have a fear of doing something new or something different. She had the logical fear of, am I going to be able to afford this? Once we were together and sharing some of those financial responsibilities, it freed her up to do a lot more things that she enjoyed and a lot less things that you do because you need the paycheck to pay the rent. It's very important for me to have those memories of her being able to do that, because her life was cut short at age 36 from angiosarcoma. So when you watch someone's theoretically full life, or life in fast forward, as a dear friend of mine once told me I was doing, sometimes you lose sight of the things that your loved one was able to do. You know, my Sarah lived a full life, even though it was 36 years. She was able to do so many different things with her time. She advocated for her rights, whether they be women's rights or individual rights, or even some patient rights things as she got into her cancer journey, being outspoken about things that just don't make sense, that maybe should make more sense. Openly advocating for me as a caregiver became very important to her, as she felt the roller coaster of the drugs and all of the different things that she was on, the monotony of the days. And then it was always a really, it's the one feeling that I never got used to reacting to, and that would be this idea of getting credit from her for being a great, her word, great caregiver. I never considered myself great. I was happy with adequate. It was always me that was the guy saying, why not do this now? Why not, why wait? Why wait? And she jumped in and worked on a local campaign in Minneapolis and met a lot of the political people here in the Twin Cities. Did a little bit inside of politics and went into being a special ed assistant and later a special ed teacher, and then found her much more comfortable as the special ed assistant. So she was really settling into being who she wanted to be when she was diagnosed with angiosarcoma in the summer of 2018. At that point, I didn't even know what the word oncology meant. I was very young when my maternal grandfather passed away from cancer, but I had never been part of the cancer journey on the inside. So I was very naive to what any of the words meant. Well, like I've come to learn with a lot of sarcomas, you typically don't hear the word sarcoma first as a diagnosis. And in our case, it was very, the time frame was nowhere near as exaggerated as some of the stories that I've been involved with since. Originally, it was the lymph nodes in her upper chest, so it was a generic lymphoma diagnosis pending a biopsy of the area. And that biopsy was to take place actually one day after my birthday. And we had plans to have people in town, and only 3 or 4 people knew that she was formally diagnosed with cancer. But all of those people were inbound that weekend. And then that biopsy took place on that Monday. When that came back as sarcoma, that's where our journey began. Like so many that I've met since that say, I don't know what that means. So in Sarah's case, it was deemed to be an angiosarcoma, or in extremely layperson's terms, cancer of the lining of a blood vessel. and that blood vessel was was between her heart and her right lung. Our immediate concerns were the attempt to have children and what that would do to Sarah. And I don't remember being told exclusively, like, that's not going to happen because she's essentially got 13 months to live at this point. But we were highly encouraged not to wait. So we were on a sprint from the very beginning to save Sarah's life and not preserve the opportunity to create life with her. Fear. Knowing that, again, the only thing that I knew in the beginning was that the medicine for cancer has side effects and makes you sick. So I have a lymphoma survivor in my family who I've become very close to in the past 4 years, and a breast cancer survivor, again, same family, aunt and uncle, and I remember wanting to build a team of people around us that had been there before. That's where my brain went somewhat systematically and went, now I need to surround myself with people who have done this before. I'm an engineer by trade, so I think that's pretty natural. My reaction to the news that we were not going to attempt to wait to reserve the right to have natural childbirth was not something that I was expecting I got to think about this, I had just turned 35, as a 35-year-old male. That is something that didn't happen for either one of us prior to our relationship, or it hadn't happened yet in our relationship together. And that was a pretty hard door to just be closed. In all due respect to the nature of the conversation and where that conversation has to go, that was my first recollection of something has now happened to me. That was my first kind of selfish reaction to that. Beyond that, it was, even though the whole experience was 13 months, I did not have an initial reaction that I was going to lose Sarah, that we collectively were going to lose Sarah. This was just a battle that we had to fight, and we needed to be all in on the fight. So I knew at that point it was my responsibility to be in charge of morale. 4th of July, 2018 was our first round of chemo. And given it was the holiday and chemotherapy mostly is outpatient therapy, they wanted to make sure that she could stay on track. And 4th of July was going to be a treatment day for her, as I remember. So in order to do that, they admitted us into the hospital. And I remember it being surreal. Oh yeah, show up after 2 o'clock, 6th floor of the hospital over here, and basically just wait for instruction. And at that point, like, she had a cough, but we walked in, we sat down, and we went, this is kind of weird. Okay. And then they come in, and then all the paperwork starts. That, okay, now you're admitted, now you got a wristband and a thing and this and that. We're going to send you down and get your port installed. And that was my first realization that there was going to be a process to this whole thing. There was going to be a routine to this whole thing. And it was going to be critical to find that routine. And of course, being new and energetic, I was like, okay, here's the routine until it changes, right? So we're going to go home today, and then that becomes tomorrow. Or this treatment's going to be at 9 o'clock in the morning. You're going to be done by 1. Adios. 9 o'clock becomes 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock becomes 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock becomes, outpatient pretty much is over at 5, mostly 6 if you're a little bit behind. Other than that, you're going to get admitted, and you're going to do what I've come to call climbing the food chain, from the ER back up to the oncology floor, one way or the other. So finding routine within her treatment became important, but at the same time, finding routine for me became important. The drugs that she was on specifically in the first round had either sleepy side effects, or they were giving her a sleepy medication to go with it because of how harsh it was. That's not for me to say, but early on, Sarah slept most of the day. Treatment days were all day. We'd get there at 8 o'clock in the morning. She would be hooked up by about 8:30, and by 9:15 she was out cold. And other than the fact you're being pumped full of fluid and have to get up to use the restroom, she'd lay back down and go right back to sleep. So it was important for me as I made that transition from, okay, it's not the beginning anymore. Now there's a routine for me to do. And I found myself walking around campus. I found myself trying to do the same things at the same time. I'm a people person. Mostly it comes from my dad. And I would go to lunch at the same time. I would see the people that worked in the cafeteria. I would see the people that were in the cafeteria because it was lunchtime for them. I felt like the only person in the hospital without a badge on, or a color, because everybody wears a color, that had a routine. But then I learned that that wasn't true, and the further I got into it, that was my story to share back with my peers, to say, I found my routine. I'm an 11 o'clock luncher. I'm a 2 p.m. Luckily, again, we treated at a hospital that had a children's hospital attached to it. And any time that I've heard of a children's hospital, typically you can find ice cream. So 11 o'clock lunch, 2 o'clock ice cream. That became a serious part of my routine, and what I later learned as just my overall mental health, that I was allowed to have a life inside of this horrible life of nobody understands what it's like to sit there and wait. Because as caregivers, we don't feel the drug directly. We feel all the side effects from that drug much longer than anybody else that's in that rotation, that medical team. Because day after day after day. And part of my routine also came to needing to learn the limits of what my wife could do. Self-care is a word that you learn later. You learn self-care when you're in groups of people that have had therapy, whether it's marriage therapy inside of a cancer journey, or individual therapy, or a living with loss treatment, stuff like this. You're going to hear self-care. In the beginning, you don't know what self-care is. Self-care is typically defined as, what did you do for an escape one day before you joined the cancer life? What was something that you did for yourself and by yourself? Didn't need any other people, anything like that. And things that you just thoroughly enjoy. So for me, for my first communion as a little kid, my first communion money went into getting a basketball hoop in my backyard. And at the top of, just before our cancer journey started, we became first-time home buyers and homeowners. So the basketball hoop I was working on assembling effectively during my wife's first treatment. And when I got home, my father and grandfather were finishing the install of the basketball hoop. And I can tell you that if I'm working through something mentally, some type of frustration or something like that, or maybe not knowing how to do something, just going out and doing something as simple as shooting free throws, just you stand there and like you're 15 feet away, you should be able to make them all, and you never can. And then you realize that your frustration is with your inability to make all your free throws and not whatever's going on inside that house. And that's really what self-care is. It's what can you do as a distraction while your loved one is very safe, because you don't want to miss anything or it's going to drive you nuts in your self-care regimen, to do something that you love to do. You have to spend time finding yourself. You have to figure out who you are as a person and how your role changes when the person who is just diagnosed in your life is not able to do the tangible life things for whatever reason at whatever stage. You may have more chores, you may have less chores, you may need a cleaning company, you may need Uber gift cards, stuff like that. Whatever those needs are, whatever you can't find as an individual within your skill set, my advice would be to offload those to others. Being a caregiver means being involved, one way or the other. You're going to be involved, and whatever your loved one's hardest thing to do for them might be, you need to take that. But yeah, supplementing your team with the things that you don't have time for or don't know how to do becomes critical. And also actively taking things away, responsibilities away from your loved one that causes them to expend too much energy or too much emotion. I'm proud today to say that, I learned that skill set from men who went before me, and I'm mentoring the men who are going after me or who are coming after me in their own journeys to be better caregivers. So that's what I remember. That's what I take out of that journey, and just having the respect was important, but she was showing admiration, which for me was not something that I understood at the time. But my role in this journey isn't over. I am a caregiver emeritus. I've heard people describe it as caregiver at rest. Not my favorite term. We as caregivers, we teach each other and we learn from each other, but we try very hard not to compare each other. We're all going through our own journeys. My journey's not over. I don't think my journey will ever be over so long as there are name funds in Sarah's name, or I'm alive, because this is something that is now in my wheelhouse, and I can use the skills that I have to help in a way that I never ever saw coming.